Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Colony Drop. My name is Brian.
And my name is Isaac. This is your favorite podcast where we talk about everything Gundam, from the models to the anime series to movies to the live action movie to anything at all remotely related to the incredible meta series that is the Gundam universe.
Oh, and what are we talking about today, Isaac?
Today we're talking about a very special game that I can guarantee very few fans have ever played, let alone heard of. It's called, well, depending on who you ask, it's called Gundam F90 Formula Wars or Gundam Formula Wars or something else in Japanese.
I've seen it two different ways. It's Mobile Suit Gundam F91 Formula Wars 0122 or Mobile Suit Gundam F91 Formula Report 0122. So Wars and Report are pretty different. Definitely gives off a different vibe.
Neither one applies to the game if you actually play it or watch it. But that's what we got, fans. Okay, it's the formula game for Super Nintendo.
Yes.
So if you're if you're a millennial on the younger side or a Zoomer, Gen Z, whatever, you probably don't know what a Super Nintendo is. Just Google it real quick, Bing it or something. Have Siri ask.
Do people actually use Bing?
There must be, like, I don't know. It's the default for some browsers, right? So, you know, there's some poor old person out there who, like, uses, like, Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer, and, like, they're Binging everything. Anyways, all right, Super Nintendo, old console back in the 90s, uses cartridges to play games. So this was, you know, this is like an 8-bit game pretty much. Not 8-bit, but 16, it's one of those bit games.
16.
There you go. 16-bit game. You know how it looks. Brian, how would you define for our listeners, like, what type of category of games would it fit into? Because I feel like it was kind of a half RPG, half strategy game, actually.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, and I don't know that I came up with a good answer. And I tried to think of, like, what you would have called it back then. Because maybe an action game today is not necessarily like an action game back then, right? So this game is from 1991. Like you said, came out only in Japan for Super Nintendo or Super Famicom, whatever you want to call it. And the only way we're able to play it is through a translated ROM. I believe the group that translated it is Twilight Translations. So thank you, Twilight Translations. You did
shout out to Twilight.
You did the Lord's work for Gundam fans who are looking to play the most obscure game from 1991. We thank you. To your question, yeah, I kind of agree with you. I definitely think there's a definite strategy element. And then there's definitely an RPG element because the suits do get stronger the more you use them. Although there's not, like, RPG customization in terms of, like, you know, classes or skills and stuff. You just kind of get new weapons, but it is up to you, and I think that's the strategy element to decide what weapons to use. I'll go through the gameplay in a second here, but let's set the stage with, you know, like, the back of the box. So if we just take what's on the wiki, which I think is a fair summary, the year is Universal Century 0122. So keep in mind that is 2 years since the year of the Gundam F90 manga, which we reviewed a few weeks ago. That is 1 year before the Gundam F91 movie. And the Mars Zeon are back, our old pals, the Oldsmobile Army. Although we thought they got wiped out in Gundam F90 when that big base, that reactor, collapsed in Olympus Mons, and Isaac made fun of their engineering prowess, they have apparently returned to threaten the Earth's sphere with an even larger force somehow. And maybe we'll find out why by the end of the game.
Well, let me say this. Some of them did escape, remember? If you listen to our podcast, I think we do discuss that, they're escaping, but, like, where the heck are they going? They're still on Mars.
Yeah,
there's nowhere to go to. But apparently they found some way to get to some Musais they had in orbit or something, right?
Yeah, not only did they find time to get away from Mars, but they found time to get to Earth. So clearly well stocked in all departments. And so because the Oldsmobiles have sort of reemerged in response, the Federation has formed the Anti-Earth Federation Organization Extermination Unit, which, man, they gotta work on those names.
This was clearly a name that was, like, designed by committee, as opposed to, like, one admiral deciding to create Londo Bell and call it Londo Bell.
Simple name, that's a good one. This one is worse than the AUG.
Yeah.
It doesn't even work as an acronym. What would you call it? The AUFU.
They should have just called it Counter Oldsmobile Armory or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or just the Oldsmobile Extermination Unit.
Or,
boom.
Yeah.
Done.
There you go. Yeah. Jeez. Okay.
So
we're already doing better.
This extermination unit has a very simple goal, which is the same goal as the squad dispatched in the Gundam F90 manga, and that is to destroy the Oldsmobile army. Everyone in their path. Just go kill them. That's kind of the mission here. And that works great for a video game because, you know what? You just send out the suits and you just blow up squadron after squadron of enemy suits.
Pretty much. And they're asking for it too, right? If you recall, listeners, as we just mentioned, the Oldsmobile Army, they built a mass driver on Mars. Of course, their plans were thwarted. But these people, they wanted to exterminate Earth. Say what you will about other Zeon. They mostly tried to like take over things. But this group was in it for extermination. So now they must be exterminated by this special task force from the Earth Federation.
That's right. So before we go into the story of what happens, let's talk about the gameplay, because this is a video game. So if you're sitting out there like us, you want to continue down your UC Next 100 journey to see what's out there in the Formula sort of era, this is the kind of gameplay you're going to be in for. So again, this is a Super Nintendo game, so it's going to be very different from a game you would play today.
Yeah.
I've never played a game like this, Isaac. Have you?
Oh, no, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the reason I said it feels like an RPG and a strategy game is because you're essentially playing two games in a way, right? Or at least two modes. There's the map mode where you're moving around your actual mobile suit on like this, 2D map, and you can see like, enemy mobile suits, and you can see your flagship. That's more sort of RTS, I guess, in a way, kind of positioning yourself and watching the enemy move around and seeing where you could tactically, strategically move. And then it switches to sort of a first-person shooter type RPG thing where you have, more of an RPG, really. You have to like select your weapons depending on like the distance the enemy is to see how effective it is. A beam saber will be close up, a beam rifle will be like longer range and things like that. It was very much an interesting hybrid, I'll say that.
Yeah, I think it was a creative solution to try to bring fast-paced mobile suit combat to an underpowered console at the time, right? I mean, you can, if you look at something like some of the games we talked about a few weeks back on the video game episodes, like the new Extreme versus Maxi Boost On game, that is just like frenetic, action-packed, 4-player, what do we call it? All range mode. Beat 'em up.
Yeah.
But you can't do that on the Super Nintendo, right? So you gotta try to find a way to emulate that a little bit.
They worked with what they had.
Yeah, totally. And I guess we should say I played through most of the game, and we'll get. And I guess I should also say this game led to probably the biggest trifecta of epic fails in my entire gaming career. And I never say the word epic fail, so we'll get to that at the end because I don't want to spoil it. But I did play through most of the game. Whereas, what did you do, Isaac?
Sadly, listeners, I could not get my... Okay, I could get the emulator and the ROM, but I couldn't really get it working with like my keyboard. This is clearly designed to use with a Super Nintendo controller or an equivalent, and I couldn't get it going. So instead, I watched a Let's Play.
Yep.
So Let's Play was incredible, by the way. There's this great Let's Play. And it had like the guy is clearly a Gundam fan because he like edited in Gundam footage and stuff like that.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's Gundam Lock-On's channel on YouTube,
you
and he is the hero that we all don't deserve. Let me tell you. We'll get to why later. I had to finish the game using his Let's Play, but yeah. So here's my take on the gameplay. So like Isaac said, there's sort of two modes. You start a mission. This game calls their missions or their levels acts. So there's 12 acts in the game. In every act, you see a little story bit, some story dialogue, and then you go into the map. And on the map, it's you in your suit. You start out with the Gundam F90. You can choose between the A-type and the D-type, or I believe it's the assault type and the destroyed type. So they just have different weapons. So you start next to your ship, we'll get to the ship in a bit, but the ship is called the Abram, and then you have allies around you that are either G cannons or I believe they're heavy guns, right? And they kind of hold off the enemies with you, but they're pretty worthless, and we'll talk about why later. So
it was Super Nintendo AI.
Yeah, they
doing
don't
the best
do
they can.
Yeah, they don't do a whole lot. And then the enemies appear on the map as well as little, mobile suits sprites, and they sort of just start coming at you. And so this is the first aspect of the strategy part of the game. You have to make sure that you fend off the right enemies so that they don't reach your ship and blow up the ship. Because you can get a game over in this game at least three different ways that I know of. You can die yourself if the enemy suits wipe out all of your allies, you lose, or if the enemy suits wipe out your ship, the Abram. So that's why two of those depend not on you but on the people around you. So you have to defend the ship, at least make sure that all of your allies don't die, and then also don't die yourself.
Is the ship defenseless?
Yes. Yes.
See, that doesn't make any sense to me because, all right, for our listeners, I'm pretty sure, just going off the graphics and the representation, that is a Clop, right? That we first see in Char's counterattack. It didn't look like a Rock Kylum class, was it?
That's a good question. It's either a Clop or a
Rock Kylum.
Or a Rock Kylum. Yeah.
Okay. Neither of which is defenseless. They're they should be pretty strong, especially against 60-year-old mobile suits.
Oh no, you're right. It is a Clop class.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
but I digress. They had to make it underpowered. Maybe they removed the guns so they could have more room for mobile suits or something. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway,
well, I mean, they don't explicitly say that it's defending itself. Okay, no. There was a time in Act 9 when I got really nervous because I did really well in the game through Act 9. I did not die, and all my allies were. I did not lose a mission once through Act 9, and the whole time I thought that if the enemy just touched your ship, like if they just moved over that tile, that you would kind of lose, right? But that didn't actually happen. So in Act 9, I had 3 enemies kind of on my ship, but I was also on my ship, kind of just fending them off as I could. So the ship doesn't die immediately. Maybe you're to infer that it's sort of fighting them off.
It's fighting one Zaku.
Yeah,
it's just giving it the runaround.
just flying in circles.
Yeah.
So once your suit touches an enemy suit, you enter the battle screen, like Isaac said. And then all of a sudden you're shifted from this horribly slow map environment to this just super fast-paced combat that if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be very confused. I was very confused at first, and I think Isaac was as well. I think I had to start the game over because I had no clue what I was doing. They don't really tell you what to do, which is pretty standard fare for Super Nintendo games if you think back. I mean, there were not tutorials back then. It's not like games today where they spend the first 30 minutes of the game walking you through it. There's no hand holding in this game. It's like, here you go, fly out there and get your ass kicked.
Maybe there was a manual, but other than that, you had to buy like a magazine.
Yeah. There's both strategy and action elements here. And the suits do get more powerful the next mission or the next act as long as you use them in the previous mission. Now, there's no like experience bar, so I can't tell if you use it more, like will it get more powerful than if you just use it once, does it get the same upgrade the next act? I'm not really sure. I couldn't tell. But you kind of play the sort of battle portion of the game by looking at a radar. You are represented in the center of a radar with a dot. And in that radar, there's 2 concentric circles forming 3 different zones: close range, medium range, and long range. In that radar circle, you have a cone of vision that's in front of you. And then you can see the enemy suits flying around on the radar. And if an enemy suit passes into your cone of vision, you can hit the attack button, and then it enters the attack phase. And that's, like Isaac said, when you get to choose your weapon. And there's different weapons for each of the suits. And each weapon has different effectiveness at different ranges. So like Isaac said, Vulcans and beam sabers, close range. Beam sabers, there's various machine guns and different cannons that do medium range, and then long range is usually some sort of like shoulder cannon or bazooka or the variable speed beam rifles, which you get towards the end of the game. And the difficulty in this game is caused or created by the fact that hitting the enemy is not up to you. You have no real way to influence it other than choosing the right weapon. whether or not your attack hits the enemy is completely RNG based or luck based, as far as I'm aware. Once you hit attack and choose a weapon, that's it. The game kind of plays it out. And for the most part, there's way less hits than there are misses. I'd say on average you hit 1 out of 3 times, maybe. And that causes the game to go on a really long time. And while you're in that sort of battle-ish radar screen, the longer you wait to attack the enemy, so for example, if you're trying to get them into your field of view, the controls do allow you to move left, right, forward, backwards, and then you can use the shoulder buttons to sort of turn. That's kind of how they're doing all range mode, I'll say.
God, it's complex.
It's once you get the hang of it, it makes sense. But if you don't know that going in, you don't know what the heck you're doing, because all you can see is little dots moving on the radar, and you have no concept of like what is happening, and you're just getting attacked, and you get frustrated pretty easily. So yeah, that's kind of the game, really. You basically the goal is kill them before they kill you, and the fastest way to do that is to maneuver your suit in a way that gets them into your field of view the quickest. And then, choose the right gun to give yourself the best chance of hitting. But again, once you choose the gun, or the weapon, I should say, it's not really up to you anymore. And if it misses, then you just try again. And the good thing about missing is if you miss, it just reverts right back to the battle screen, and you can immediately hit attack again, because usually the enemy will not have moved yet. Once you get them in your field of view, you got to keep hitting that attack button and keep trying to hit them and see if it works out for you. And yeah, that's the game. And you basically get attacked by more and more enemies each act in maybe slightly different formations. But overall, it is like, what do they call it? A battle of attrition. And
the meat grinder.
In terms of how much time you want to spend on this game. So again, there's 12 acts. I'd say the beginning acts take maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And as you progress, I think Act 9 or Act 10, I was almost done with it. And that took close to an hour. So the more enemies, the more time you spend, especially if you shoot at something 3 times and you miss all 3 times. You have to watch the cinematic play every time of your suit. If you use the beam rifle, your suit pulls out the beam rifle, does a few shots. Then you watch the beams go by and see if it hits the enemy suit, and if they'll dodge it or they'll get hit a little bit. So I'm sure you saw this in the Let's Play, Isaac. And those Let's Plays, I'll have you know, he sped those Let's Plays up probably at least 3 by like a factor of 3. So
I bet, yeah. He also said that, like, I think RNG, random number God, is involved also in the enemy positions. And
yes,
is that true? Like sometimes you restart and the enemy's in a completely different formation.
Yeah, apparently that is true. I did not know that until the very end when I was playing the game, because I didn't die I didn't die through Act 9, and I only noticed that when I started over an act. I think I started over. We'll get to why, but I started over Act 5 again. And I did notice I was thrown off by that, because all of a sudden my ship was in a different spot on the map, my allies were in a different spot, and the enemy was in a completely different spot.
According to him, that made certain scenarios impossible to win. Like, there would be certain scenarios where I guess the enemy was too close to his units or to his flagship or something like that, or just the position. The enemy was at too advantageous of a position, randomly generated, and they would win. So he had to keep restarting until he had a chance.
Yeah, I totally believe that, because again, like we talked about, there are allies, there are heavy guns, and there are G cannons. They do hold off the enemy, but they don't kill them. So you may see them kind of just, their sprites, your ally sprite and the enemy sprite will just stand there probably for a few fights and not move. After they stand there for a while, if you go and engage them later on, those enemy units will have they'll start with lower health when you engage them. I guess to signify that your allies did some damage, kind of like while you were fighting over there. Right. But I don't think that your allies ever completely destroy the squadron. I think you have to go in and at least finish them off.
That's terrible.
Yeah, they're not a lot of help, to be honest. If all those enemy squads kind of start closer, or you start in a corner, it could be really difficult maybe to kind of beat the mission, especially towards the later part of the game where there are just an enormous amount of enemies. Generally, one enemy sprite on the map usually has at least 3 enemy suits in it, sometimes 4 or 5 when you engage them. And I think when I was in Act 10, I'm pretty sure it started with 11 or 12 squadrons on the screen. But that's between 33 and 55 suits that I have to kill, and that's before any reinforcements show up. And if it takes me 5 minutes maybe to kill all 3 of them in a squadron, you're looking at some serious time there. And then if you lose at the end of the mission, you just wasted a solid hour, because these games aren't like games today. You can't start from where you died. You got to replay the whole mission, and we'll get to that later. But that's kind of the gameplay. Every level is very similar. It just gets harder due to more enemies and formations, basically. So that's what you're in for if you decide to play this game.
That was a lot. That was a lot to take in, and listeners, you would be correct in assuming that there were not additional games of this style made after this. And we can see why, because it's possibly needlessly complex, or at least, it needed more time in the oven, I think, for them to work out how the game mechanics would work and how, I guess, accessible and fun it would be. But you know what? It was an interesting part of the Gundam timeline leading up to F91. That's kind of why we selected it in a way. And I thought story-wise it was pretty interesting. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I actually really like the story. I think it creates some problems, which I think we probably both we have. I guess I should say
a lot.
I should say Isaac and I have not discussed this yet. We were discussing this for the first time here. So I'm curious to see if we arrived at the same, I don't want to call it continuity problems, but sort of logical problems. But again, so because this is something that you all probably haven't played, I think we'll probably just briefly go through the story here, from kind of start to finish, because I think that's fun for these Formula era things that no one's really watched. So like we said before, the story, begins in UC 0122. And the Oldsmobiles are back, and they're attacking. The Federation forms the whatever it's called, the Oldsmobile Elimination Force, some longer name. And we start on the ship, as Isaac said, which is a Klopp class. So already hitting it out of the park. Didn't get a Rock-High Loom this time. Instead, we got a Klopp. Yeah, the ship is called the Abram, and it has received orders to transport the Gundam F90 to the Elimination task force. And they are going to Side 4 to do that. And we meet our hero, or our protagonist, who you play as the whole time. His name is Bergh Scred. Another great... where does this fall on our list of formula names, right? Because we've had Def Stallion, Tokyo Randall. Now we got Bergh Scred. These are some top-notch 90s tough guy names, right?
Right, you are. They're very Gundam. We'll just say that. There's random is the best of the most random Gundam.
And there's going to be a lot of characters that show up in this series that have really terrible names. So we first meet Bergh, and apparently he was a Jegan pilot, and his Jegan got damaged, and so now he's upset because he can't fight in this next sortie against the Oldsmobiles. And he's so insistent, the captain of the Abram tells him, you know what, go ahead and take out the F90. And which is kind of surprising, right? The captain gives the F90 to the guy that got shot down, not to maybe the people that didn't get shot down that are still fighting in their Jagans or their heavy guns. What did you think about that, Isaac?
I was trying to think okay, I imagine fighter pilots, they want to fly in their fighter. That's the one that they're used to. Maybe it's been customized to their standards. They don't want to get into something that's flashy and new that, sure, on paper it might be better, but at the end of the day, their fighter is still their fighter. So I imagine it was the same for the mobile suit pilots.
Okay, I can go with that.
Otherwise it makes no sense why they would give this flunky one of the most advanced suits in the whole Federation Navy.
And I guess, actually, if you think about it, when they say we are carrying the F90, they literally mean the F90 that was left over from Gundam F90, I suppose, unless they made a new one.
Yeah, it's the one.
That's kind of neat, right? Connections, people.
Yeah, they're one prototype. I wonder what the logic is for giving it to the Abram. Like, give them our prototype to take in a battle against, the Oldsmobile army because it worked before. Is that the logic, or?
Could be, yeah. I'll have to go look that up. I don't know if it's actually the same one, but Bergh goes out in the F90 and beats up a bunch of Oldsmobile Army Zaku's and Doms, which, Isaac, they're bringing back the Doms again. Are you loving this?
I love seeing those little chunky monsters flying around in space, getting shot left and right.
They represented themselves well, I think. The Doms had great sprites in this game, and they even got some more color variations as we go through the game. So, and again, you start out with the F90 A-type and D-type. Probably the coolest thing about the A-type is you eventually get these cool shoulder beam rifles that hit long range. Really enjoyed those. And then the D-type, you eventually get these rockets, and as well as, I believe, the cracker grenade. When I saw that you got the cracker grenade, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Isaac loves the cracker grenade. So.
Yeah, it's a very Zeon thing. Speaking of Zeon thing, man, the Gelgoos looked great in this, didn't they?
They did. The Gelgoos looked awesome. Those first come in, I think mission 2, and they come in 2 colors. Well, 3 if you count the end. So I think they have like the normal blue and green colors, but it seems like the colors are switched, if I'm remembering that right. Like they're inverted in this. Or maybe I'm not. I don't know. But then you got the cool red and gray one as well. Which one did you like better?
Definitely the red and gray. I didn't see that one coming, and then when I saw it, I was like, all right, somebody took the time when they were, coding this, all the little bits and stuff. They made it look really damn nice.
Yeah. I think overall, actually, the suit design in this game is great.
Yeah, they really took the time to get the proportions right, and visually, if you're a Gundam fan, you will instantly recognize pretty much every mobile suit you see.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool to see in the game versus the mangas, right? Because in F90, we did see some Oldsmobile suits, but they weren't in color, right? They're in manga form. And so here you can kind of see how the Zeon designs have been updated a little bit easier. I agree. I had the same thought when I first saw it. So
there you go, yeah.
So in Act 1, Bergh flies down the F90, saves everybody. They proceed to their mission. They're still trying to meet up with the Elimination Task Force to give them the F90. But in Act 2, they come up against the Charles fleet, led by Charles Rochester, or I think Major Charles Rochester of the Oldsmobile Army, who is, I guess, the main antagonist for the most part. Would you agree with that, Isaac?
I'd agree with that, yeah. He's part of the intimidatingly named Charles fleet. He's leading it. He's a major, right? Even though technically, if you're running a fleet, shouldn't you be an admiral, if not in name, in practice? But I digress.
That's a good point. The translation we have said he was a major. Whether that makes sense or not, I don't know. But it's called the Charles Fleet, and this is Charles. So
yeah, I didn't really get the scale of the Charles Fleet. I mean, they show us 3 Musai, but according to the the intro text, this is a very large scale threat to the Federation, but 3 Musai should not be a threat, right. Really.
Exactly.
But anyways, quick question, Brian. The Oldsmobile Army, as we know, is made up of mostly old men. Charles didn't seem too old. Did you think that might just be the limitations of the system, or is Charles maybe sort of like the traitor, just a younger member, like maybe someone's son or something that joined from the Federation and went to Mars or something? Like,
I agree. He definitely does not look old, and I just looked it up. He is canonically only 25.
Wow. Okay, so he's a Zeon by choice, more or less.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Anyways, yeah, he's kind of the bad guy, but again, I wouldn't say he was a very well done bad guy.
No. I mean, given that it's a video game, you get a few snippets of dialogue before each mission starts. You don't get a whole lot of backstory other than, look, this is his fleet. He's pissed off and he wants to, destroy the Earth Federation in the name of Zeon. But unfortunately, as Act 2 unfolds, because Bergh did so well in the F90, he gets to go out again in it, and he kind of just, I mean, you're the player character, so you just kind of mop the floor with Charles's fleet, and I think he says like "damn you," and then he leaves. Him and his Musai's like retreat. But he did it in style with those cool Gelgoogs, right? I believe the red ones are the commander units, whereas the blue ones are the sort of the grunt Gelgoogs. So once we defeat Charles, he doesn't die. He just retreats. He's going to come back later. They continue
happen a
lot. Yeah. So our Abram pals continue on to try to meet up with the Force. This time the captain says, the captain, whose name is
we'll call him Captain Quasi Revel because he looks a lot like General Revel.
He does look a lot like General. Yeah, Weibel Gardner is his name. I think he looks like a sea captain. Like he looks like he should be captaining an actual like ship in the ocean.
Yeah, he's got a bushy beard. Revel kind of kept his pretty trim, but a bit of a seaworthy, swarthy seaman.
Yep. So Captain Weibel Gardner, aka Formula Revel, he says, "Oh, we got to go stop at this colony before we meet up with the extermination force or elimination force, whatever they're called, because we have new info that the Oldsmobiles they're holed up in this colony, and we need to deal." This was one of my favorite parts of the game. I felt like the writing for this game was really good at some points, and then just terrible at other points. But sometimes they had cool lines like this because the captain was like, "Oh, we need to deal with this smoothly," which basically just means, "Bergh, please go kill them." So I thought that was entertaining. Again, during this mission, you're in a colony. And what happens when you're inside a colony, Isaac, and you fight with mobile suits?
You punch holes in the colony.
That is right. And if you fly over one of those holes in the colony, you will get sucked out and die. So I guess that's another way to kind of lose the mission.
Here's a question. How do you die if you're inside not only your normal suit, but you're inside your mobile suit? How?
Oh, that's a good point. I guess you wouldn't die, right? You would just fail the mission because you kind of abandoned the Abram.
But you can fly back in.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
That happens all the time in combat with colony.
That's an excellent point I didn't think about while playing the game.
They just wanted to make the map different.
Yeah. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Most of the levels in this game are just excuses to use a different background to fly around in. So we just had 2 space battles, and this is the first one that has like a different background. There's a colony in the background, which is actually pretty cool. You can see the colony mirrors. So they really tried to kind of go all out on the background art, which I really appreciated.
They did what they could, yeah. Yeah,
the sprite work in general I think is pretty good for this game. If you've not played a Super Nintendo game before and you're used to like modern gaming, this is going to be a change for you. But if you're like us and you used to play these type of games, it kind of makes sense. So we fight inside the colony. We avoid the holes. We beat up the Oldsmobiles again, and at the end of the mission, we capture an Oldsmobile captain to get some information. And then all of a sudden, I guess based on that information, we now have new orders because we need to take a shuttle to Earth to battle the Oldsmobile army, who's made it to Earth in the ocean. And at this point, I was like blown away. Did this make any sense to you, Isaac? I was like, you're telling me 2 years ago the Oldsmobile army was on Mars, and we thought we wiped them out, and now all of a sudden, not only have they come back bigger and stronger, but they made it to Earth. How did the Federation fail so hard that they allowed them onto Earth to get any sort of stronghold?
I have my theory, Brian. Are you ready to hear it?
I'm ready.
As you recall, in the F91 movie, it's hinted that the Federation has been assisting the Crossbone Vanguard. Well, at least maybe not the whole Federation, but members within the Federation. Yes. I think that's been happening at this point in time, way before F91 even happens. So, as usual, corrupt Federation, there's officers or politicians that are somehow given a help to anti-Federation forces.
Well, that's the only thing that makes sense. So I like that theory, and let's go with it. So yeah, clearly the Federation screwed up or aided and abetted these fellows and let them onto Earth. So now it's old Bergh's job to go to Earth and eliminate them. But I think before you get there, we end up in an atmospheric battle with Charles again. So Charles comes back. This is a big turning point in the story because I think the Abram at this point is linking up with the elimination team. So we finally made it. But our Captain Not Revel goes and discusses with the Colonel, whose name is Colonel Telst. That's super hard to say. The names are just going to get worse from here on out, people, let me tell you.
Not in the Telst family.
Oh, and the Colonel says, you know what, Bergh, you're getting us some good data, so just keep on piloting the F90. Keep doing what you're doing. All right, so main character has now secured the suit for the rest of the series. Then a new guy shows up out of nowhere named, oh, here we go with those 90s tough guy names again, named Lieutenant Wilder Cuts. Hot damn. So this guy just kind of shows up out of nowhere. He reminds me a lot of Captain Levi. If you people have watched Attack on Titan, he just, I don't know. He's like brooding, and he just, okay, I'm good. I'm gonna go over here now in the corner. And he says, "I'm Bergh. I'm counting on you, Bergh. I was gonna be a Gundam pilot once too." And then all of a sudden, I think there's a redheaded girl named Anaphil. What a weird name. That can't be right. Her name has to be something else. Anaphil is a weird name.
I thought it was Annabelle, but anyways, yeah.
Oh, Annabelle makes way more sense. It's probably supposed to be Annabelle, but
Anaphil. Her parents couldn't decide between Annabelle or Phyllis, so they decided to meet in the middle at Anaphil.
Yeah. So I think we met Anaphil at some point in the past, one of the other missions, and all of a sudden now she has a scar from the last battle. And you kind of get the sense that Bergh likes Anaphil, or he's sort of pining after her, or he's worried about her. She tells him, Bergh, be careful when you fight the Red Gelgoog. So Bergh goes out. There's a lot more groups in this map. Charles has got his Red Gelgoog. And then as we defeat them, all of a sudden you get your F90 into the P-type, which is basically just like I don't know. Did you see the P-type, Isaac? It's basically some airplane parts that let you re-enter the atmosphere, I suppose.
You Zeta Gundam it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you just transform and coast in.
Yep. So we put on our P-type, we fly in. So now we're going to Earth. You know why? Because you can do a lot more background sceneries on Earth than you can in space.
Let me ask you this, Brian. Let me jump in real quick. So I was watching the Let's Play. I'm not sure if I missed it, but what exactly is the purpose of the attack on Earth by the Oldsmobile Army? They can't be heading to Jabral. Like, it looked like they're in the desert. What the hell are they doing?
I don't think they ever gave a real reason other than we need to go get them.
Well, I guess depending on what we see later on in the story, it makes perfect sense that this is almost the thinnest of a distraction. So
yes. So we make it to Earth, and we basically get put right into a desert battle. There's these Zeon folks on Earth who are just mad. This guy, he's got a big scar over his eye. He calls the Federation bastards and sicks his ground forces on us. And then Bergh goes, okay, I'll go find the ground forces. And then it's like really random. All of a sudden he starts asking our pal Lieutenant Wilder Cuts, hey, where's Anaphil? Have you seen Anaphil? And Wilder gets a little suspicious, and he's like, oh, I don't know, but don't be late. I'm counting on you. And this is the first level where we get the Desert Dom, Isaac, as an enemy. Did you love the Desert Dom?
It was it was okay.
Really? I thought you would have loved this thing.
I have my likes. Okay, it's no Dom Troppin, I'll say that.
Okay. All right. Well, we get the desert colored Dom, which was cool, and we get the Goofs. The Goofs have had a little bit of a visual upgrade. They got some more coloring in there. They got a bigger whip, cool like heat sword. This map was a little bit tougher than the rest. I had to switch out my suits quite a few times to keep my health safe. That's another strategy play in the game. You can swap your F90 equipment out as long as you go back to the ship. And every time you do, you get replenished fuel and replenished health. Oh, I should also say you'll die if you run out of fuel, but that would be really hard to do unless you used one suit the entire time if you don't switch out. So that's sort of an exploit of how to stay alive in this game. You have to switch out the suits. You're never going to make it through a whole map without switching out at least once, especially towards the end of the game. And so Bergh does what he does best and just tears through the Oldsmobile Army in the desert. Even Wilder afterwards is like, hey, you did a good job. And Wilder is piloting a Jegan, of all things. He really needs to upgrade if he wants to compete here, because if you've watched Gundam F91, the Jegans do terrible. I don't see how this guy's still alive. Why are people still piloting Jegans?
The Federation, like any large organization, wants to save money and hold on to things longer than they should. I think when we're talking about capital ships, right, we read that like the Salamis was being used way into the future, like post like Victory Gundam,
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true. And I mean, I guess Charles is using Musai's, right? So, but Charles, he's got no money. These Oldsmobile people, they don't have many resources for the most part, except for their sponsors. But
a Jegan will be way more advanced than anything that they're flying anyway.
But if Lieutenant Wilder is like your guy, right? I mean, anyone whose name is Wilder, you got to be a good pilot. Wouldn't you give him one of the new heavy guns or the G cannons? Instead, they give this guy a Jegan. I mean,
Well, if he's experienced enough with the Jagans, that might be a right request. He might prefer something like that. Like I was in a 7-Eleven, time for an anecdote. I was in a 7-Eleven once, and I was behind like a sheriff, and he was like talking to the store clerk, and I think the store clerk was like talking about his gun or something. He was like, "Oh, you're still using a revolver or something, like, and you're not using like a Glock or whatever." And the sheriff was like, "Yeah, this was an old guy. He had like a mustache and stuff. That's the kind of sheriff he was." And he was like, "Yeah, it won't jam on me."
Oh.
And then like he laughed and like I bought my Slurpee. So I always thought that was an interesting anecdote. Like, okay, so he wants something older that maybe he thinks is more reliable or that he's used to. It must be the same situation here. So
yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
You really don't like these Ace Pilot. Like, I imagine the Brian fleet will be like it's only top of the line mobile suits. Like any Ace Pilot or pilot that wants to fly in the fleet, they have to use whatever the top of the line assigned suits are.
Well, no, it's fine to use the old ones. I just think if this guy is like Mr. Hot Stuff, shouldn't they give him one of the newer suits? Because clearly the people piloting the newer suits, they suck. They die all the time in these missions. Every time you're on the map, you come back after fighting and blowing up 3 or 4 of the Oldsmobiles. You come back and a few of your allies get blown up and the enemy just advances. So if Mr. Wilder is the best over here, maybe he should have the heavy gun or the G cannon, which are 30 years newer than what he's piloting. I'm questioning the asset allocation here of the Federation.
Well, you're not Admiral Telst, so
yeah, that's true. So anyway, Bergh does what he does best, blows up everybody in the desert, and you get this real quick message that says, "That's right, we confirm all the Oldsmobiles in the desert are annihilated. So go to the ocean." So time for a new background. So we go to Act 6, and your friends, who I didn't mention because they're kind of just annoying and they always act superior to you. Their names are like Biak and like Albert, I think. One has blonde hair, and the other guy has the red hair. I forget which one's which. But anyway, they tell you, "Hey, you're late. This is the new captain in the ocean. So now you get on a submarine called the Garwish." Again, terrible name. Here we get a female submarine captain, and even the game knows that this is rare because someone goes, "Oh wow, a female captain."
Did they say that to like her face when she's in the?
Yeah, they did.
Oh god. How do you not get reprimanded in the military for this?
If they ever adapt this, they'll probably have to change that line a little bit.
But with pride, maybe she was like, "Yeah, that's right. That's right." And I'm part of this mission too.
Yeah, but she's great though because you get in the submarine and she's like, "Hey, I have new Gundam parts for you." And at this point, you're like, "Yes, give me something better because I want to pilot the thing that's on the box." So if you look at the box of this game, there's 2 suits on it. There's the F91 and the F90V type, which is the VS variable speed beam rifle type or the VSBR type. Has all these cool looking fins on it. Looks way better than any of the other F90s in my opinion. So she gives you, "Hey, I have the V pack, the V type mission pack here." And you get a beam shield and you get the VSBR, which is a long range beam rifle with unlimited ammo. So from here on out, the V type is your best suit from a gameplay perspective, at least until you get the F91 a little later. So this map was super easy because you just pick up the V type and you're like, all right, VSBR, all these babies, just keep them in long range mode and just go to town. But here we did get the Remnant Forces Zagok. The Zagok came back, Isaac, looking more menacing than ever.
I love it with those big noodly arms.
Bergh goes out in the V-type, wipes out all the Zagoks to sort of very little fanfare. There was a current in this level, which was kind of cool. It kind of changed the way that you had to move around on the map. You could tell they were really trying to, spice it up in terms of the map stuff. You had the holes in the colony. Now you had, I think in the desert, there were people hiding in the sand. And then here you had, currents. So Bergh blows everyone up, and then they say, "You know what? Turns out there's someone sponsoring the Oldsmobile army in the shadows, and they're starting to make their move." And at this point, you're like, "Oh, who could it be?" If you've seen F91, then you probably know who it is, but we're not there yet.
And something game. Who could possibly be involved in the plot?
So after that, the captain says, "You know what? Go to the spaceport. You need to go back to space." And at this point, I was like, "But we were just in space. Why did we come down here if we're just going to go back to space?"
You had to mop up the enemy, all right, on the ground. Now we need
I
you back in
guess.
space.
I guess, but and I'm gonna get to this at the end, but I think Bergh, our pal Bergh Scred here, is the only competent pilot in the Federation at this point because he is single-handedly destroying the Oldsmobile army. Every mission, you're destroying 20-something suits on his own. If an ace pilot is like whatever we said, isn't it like between 4 and 10 kills or something like that? This dude has a huge kill count by the end of the game. He's got to be among the best Federation pilots.
After the first act, he has a huge kill count.
He does, yeah. That's right. So we get on our submarine, or maybe we're in a Garuda class. Maybe we're in the plane at this point. And we're flying over the mountains, and all of a sudden something happens to the ship, and there's like a power outage, and we get a notice that there's an emergency landing, and we need to land, and there's enemies here all of a sudden, and we land in the snow because you know what? We haven't had a snow background yet, Isaac. So let's have a snow level. Why not?
Sure.
And you know who's hiding in the snow? Snow version DOMs, which look great.
They look pretty cool. I don't know. There's something about like Arctic mobile suits. It fits well with like robotic designs, right?
Yes. These ice blue DOMs look legit. I really want a master grade ice blue Oldsmobile DOM. I think they're awesome.
Put it next to your desert DOM.
yeah, exactly. So, but again, you just kind of pull out the V-type, VSBR, all these DOMs to hell. At the end of the mission, we zip back into the romance plot thread randomly, which hasn't been talked about in a while. And Bergh's he's all nervous all of a sudden. He's like, "Where's Anaphil? I can't find her." And so now you're like, "Uh-oh, Anaphil's gone. What's going on?" That's all you know for now is just that Bergh can't find Anaphil, so something must be up. So the Garuda class ship that we're on, and we make it to the spaceport. We're going back to space, Isaac. We've exhausted all sceneries on Earth: desert, snow, water. I guess we didn't really have like a forest level or something, but
no.
Oh well.
Thank God. Well, they you know why they couldn't, right? Because then they'd be putting green Zaku sprites over a green field.
Oh,
it would have been a nightmare. So
yeah. That's probably true. So we get to the spaceport in Act 8, and our jerk friends Biak and Albert are talking, and they're like, "You haven't told Bergh what happened, man." And Bergh overhears, and so now he knows something's up. And then Wilder tells him, "Hey, man, you better get your F90 on the shuttle. The Oldsmobile army's approaching." And it's just all these weird things there's like no explanation. What I'm saying, it sounds like it's jumping around, and that's because it is. That's basically what happens in the game. There's really no kind of structure to this. But anyway, you get back in your F90 V-type, blow everybody away. This was a cool map, I thought, because at this point you're dealing with all of the remaining Oldsmobile forces on Earth. So they start throwing everything at you. They have DOMs, GOX, and GUFs, which makes sense, right? You fought all these guys during all the different missions, and they're just throwing everything they have left at you. So I thought that was
boss
cool.
Rush.
Yeah. We get on the shuttle, and all of a sudden Wilder, he goes to another craft to sort of escort us. Our shuttle launches, and then it cuts to this cutscene where Wilder gets all upset, and he says, "I'm going to have my revenge." We don't really know, I guess. I don't think they ever told us why he needs revenge, but plan to get revenge didn't work out because someone shoots at him and blows him up.
Yeah. Cuts him in half, man. Yeah.
Maybe that's why they gave him a Jagan. Maybe he wasn't very good anyway, it turns out. So we lost Lieutenant Wilder.
Maybe he was fighting during Shard's counterattack, and like that's the revenge, and that's also why he keeps the Jagan. Like it all goes back to there.
I like that backstory better than what we got.
Yeah, he lost a lot of friends. He's decided to keep his Jagan as long as they'll, keep stamping his little pilot card and saying, "Fine, well you can deploy with the Jagan." And the revenge plan against Zeon didn't really work out because sure he killed a lot of them, but he died in the end before the mission concluded.
Act 9 is called, this had one of my favorite names, the Charles Fleet Annihilation. So we rejoin the Abram back in space. So our Earth detour is over, our pointless Earth detour. And the captain goes, "Good job. The ground forces on Earth are annihilated." And we found out that the Crossbone Vanguard are the ones lending a hand to the Oldsmobile army from the shadows. And this actually makes sense in universe, I think.
Yeah.
because the Oldsmobile Army has all these suits. Someone clearly had to give them to them. They weren't doing that well back on Mars.
No.
I at least thought that made sense, even though maybe some stuff later on doesn't make sense. But at least
Yeah.
the idea of a sponsor, I think, makes sense, right, Isaac? We have to have that here for this to make
Yeah.
sense.
Their success, well, not success, but their progress to this point, it's more believable that they not only were a threat to the Earth sphere, flew from Mars to Earth, managed to get ground troops on Earth. It's more believable that all that happened because they had Crossbone Vanguard support than they just did it on their own or were lucky because they're in Musai, they're in old mobile suits. There's not a lot of them. How is this even happening?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So.
And then all of a sudden we get this new information. The captain says, "Hey, it's the Crossbone Vanguard, and they have a base in lunar orbit, and they're going to attack. So we got to go. And by the way, I've got you a Gundam F91 now." And you're just like, "What is all this? What is all this information? Like, where did all this stuff come from?" So the Charles fleet is approaching. That damn Charles is back. And so as he's approaching, the mechanic explains, "Hey, we have this Gundam F91 now. We built this thing based on the F90V type. That's why the F91 has the VSBRs, because the VSBRs and the F90 were so good. And now you've got two kick-ass suits for the rest of the game, right? You've got the F91, which is even better than the F90V type. And even if the F91 is maybe not doing so hot, you can hop in your F90V type if you want and still kind of get the same performance." This is the first mission, Isaac, where the Crossbone Vanguard joins the fight. Some Denon Zons approach along with Charles's Gelgoogs. But old Bergh pulls it out with the F91, and Charles gets mad. Him and his token 3 Musais, they retreat. And so now the captain's like, "All right, we got to go. Let's go to the moon. Come on, keep going." So we get to Act 10. So the Abram is approaching the moon, and there's a battle already going on. And we get a transmission from the Federation flagship who's engaging the Crossbone Vanguard. And they say, "Hey, we need help." So Captain goes, "Bergh, get out there, full speed ahead. We're giving them reinforcement." And then boom, all of a sudden, who shows up, Isaac?
Iron Mask Kurozo Rona.
What does he do?
Well, he's in like one scene and he orders like the attack, right? He's commanding his fleet.
Yeah, he literally says something like, "I have no time to deal with the Federation." But actually, that's kind of the whole point of his plan here, I think. So I don't really get that. And then his cameo scene is over.
Yeah, we never see him again. He won't be the boss of this game or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Aye. So Bergh goes out in the F91, wipes the floor with the Denon Zons and the Charles Gelgoogs. The enemy fleet retreats. It was interesting how they describe it. I don't know if you noticed this, but it says that both the Federation and the Crossbone Vanguard fleet, or the Charles fleet, whatever, kind of just stopped fighting, but they both kept advancing towards the moon. It was like a ceasefire. No one really won. They kind of just stopped. So,
yeah.
Kind of odd.
Everybody's licking their wounds to get to like the final battlefield.
Yep. And so we finally get close enough to the moon to land, and the captain all of a sudden has more information. He goes, "Hey, you know what? All right, we're at the moon." And it turns out that the moon's mass driver base has been occupied by the Crossbone Vanguard. And I think the Crossbone Vanguard want a line of defense between them and the Federation. So they're trying to take over this mass driver. And so then Bergh's like, "Oh, yeah? Well, Captain, do you think we should attack it?" And he's like, "Yeah, get down there, Bergh. Go take back that base." Very astute observations from Bergh in terms of battle strategy. Clearly, he's read Art of War a few times.
We should definitely take back the possible weapon they can use against our planet.
Yes. And then we are introduced to the guy who has the worst name in the game, Colonel Dahajo, who I can't tell. I couldn't tell. Was he on the Crossbone Vanguard or was he with the Oldsmobiles?
Pretty sure that looked like a Crossbone uniform. It had purple and gold, I think. So.
Okay, so he reveals the plan, and the plan was basically to use the moon's mass driver system to launch meteorites at Earth. That is suspiciously similar to the plan that the Oldsmobiles had on Mars to launch the Olympus Mons cannon. Did you laugh when that plan was revealed, Isaac?
I didn't so much laugh, but I was underwhelmed. Earlier, there was an act, right, or a mission where there were meteorites with like mines on them, right, attacking the Abrams or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So to hear meteorites again, I was like, well, I don't know what's going on at the time of development. Maybe Hail Bop or something, but like people were really interested in like meteorites or something. So I was like, I mean, sure they can attack Earth like that, but I don't think that's been too much of a credible threat that the Federation's had to face. They have mass drivers for transportation.
Maybe if they just launched a lot of them, though, they couldn't keep up or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it wasn't so much the super weapon, but like the meteorites it does launch could be more very strategic or tactical weapons. Like you wouldn't want it hitting like a spaceport, or like the Solomon's factory on Earth or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. And you know why we went to the moon, Isaac? Because now you can have a mission with a moon background. So boom,
of course,
this whole act takes place on the moon with a sweet moon background with craters, and the captain gives you very distinct orders. He just says, "Bergh, destroy them all." And so that's what Bergh does. He goes in, F91 takes them all out, and then we get to the final chapter, Isaac, where it's called In Eternal Darkness, and that's that's a heavy title right there. Yeah. So I was a little confused here because remember we weren't on the moon, so we went to the moon. We took back the mass driver base, and now we have to go to an enemy fortress which is near the moon. So I'm a little confused why we didn't just go to the enemy fortress first. It seems odd to go to the moon first instead of the fortress. I don't know.
Well, I think the mass driver was under Earth Federation control, of course. So maybe priority was regain what we lost, and then we'll go take down this asteroid base they pulled out of nowhere.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I can get on board with that. So, this is also where the plot sort of becomes completely clear. I'm gonna give you my take of what's going on. I mean, you can let me know if I'm right. You're better at these villainy things. All right. We see Charles, who is now referred to as Sir Charles because he has been sort of absorbed into the Crossbone Vanguard. He's talking to a guy named Sir Chatre. Chatre? I don't know. And it's revealed that yes, Chatre gave Charles and the Oldsmobiles their mobile suits, their supplies, but it does appear now that Charles knows that he's now it's no longer Zeon's fight because his forces are kind of demolished because basically Bergh kind of killed them all himself. But Charles says, you know what, I know that you're using me to do whatever it is you're trying to do against the Federation, but I'm gonna go down fighting in the name of Zeon. He tells his men to leave, but there's a squad of Doms with him, which I thought you would like this a lot because the Dom squad was like, they were like, no, we're not leaving, and we will fall under the name of Zeon with you. And so Charles gives this, really epic order. He says, all Charles' air squadron, follow my mobile suit, Zig Zeon. And then the Bergh launches in the Gundam. The crew promises each other that we'll all come back alive. And the game's getting real hard at this point because I think Act 10 and 11 are the hardest in the game for sure. But not only are the Crossbone Vanguard people using Denon Zons, but they're also using the Bergh Adalis now. And that's the same suit that was piloted by Jarrell in Gundam F91, which was probably one of the best on the battlefield.
It's only given. I mean, they don't give that to everybody.
Yeah. Well, Bergh's killing these things left and right. I mean, there's at least 5 of them in each of these last acts here. So, but Charles here comes out in he's got his own mobile suit, Isaac.
Yeah, he's got the what was it? The Charles Gelgoog?
Custom refined Gelgoog. It's pretty sweet color scheme. It's red and white. Looks pretty neat, especially if you look up the new art for it versus the sprite. The sprite is a little unclear, but when you look at the new art, it looks pretty damn cool. That's when it clicked for me. His name is Charles, and he pilots a red Gelgoog. A little bit on the nose, but did you get that too?
He's no Char.
But guess what? Charles and his cool Gelgoog, not enough to cut the F91 down. Even though he has these really cool twin green beam sabers, he's got a blue beam shield, but old Bergh pulls it out, and Charles goes down. And then we get a little epilogue here. Chatria from the Crossbone Vanguard says something very confusing. Maybe it's just bad translation, I'm not sure. He says, the whole Federation is at our doorstep. Do with them what you wish, Crossbone Vanguard. And then he says, "Long live Crossbone Vanguard." And I'm confused what he's trying to do or what he's trying to say there. And then Bergh, he thinks he's going to die because he's floating in his Gundam, but the air is leaking. The Abrams catches him, and they said, "Oh, we got to head to Side 4 to Frontier 1." And Bergh starts talking to the mechanic, and he says, "The F90 and the F91 are still test units. We can't use them to their fullest potential until SNRI gives them some adjustments." Bergh wonders, wow, how much of a monster will these suits be when they're completed? And the mechanic says, "Well, when they're finished, Bergh, only a new type will be able to handle them." Which means that Bergh isn't a new type, which means this dude is like the best pilot the Federation has had in a long ass time. This dude single-handedly killed everybody in the Oldsmobile army. He must have a kill count well above 100 at this point.
Probably.
And that's kind of the story. It ends there. Bergh says goodbye to the F91, and the Abram flies away. And then there you have it.
I have two questions. What happened to the Musais that were part of the Charles fleet? Are they implied to be destroyed, or did they just fly away to fight another day?
I would assume they were destroyed. We don't actually see.
Okay.
We don't actually see enemy ships on the map. Like, you don't get to attack them per se.
The Crossbone Vanguard base that was orbiting the moon, like, did it destroy it? Did the Federation destroy it? We don't actually see them destroy it, right? It's implied that they blasted it. They killed all the mobile suits guarding it and then just landed the troops on it and took it over. Or they blew it up outright with, beam cannons or something.
Yeah. I think that sort of gets us into the problems this series causes, right? So it's not completely clear to the very end, but am I right in assuming that the Crossbow Vanguard was basically trying to use the Oldsmobile army to sort of hit the Federation instead of doing it directly themselves, kind of up until the end?
Yeah, but that still doesn't really explain what the overall Crossbone plan was. Like, have the Federation be distracted by the Oldsmobile army while you take the mass driver and do some kind of attack on Earth. I don't think any attack on Earth with a mass driver would have been enough to be a knockout punch. And what was the point of having a base just suddenly show up around lunar orbit? Like, for trying to be in the shadows, pulling up your asteroid base to the moon is the opposite of being discreet. So
yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with this in terms of like sort of logical continuity. Again, this game takes place in Universal Century 0122. F91 takes place the next year. I don't know if they're exactly a year apart, probably less time. But how does the Federation not know that the Crossbone Vanguard is completely hostile?
You can explain it away by like I said before, the corruption that will have politicians and Federation officers who are clearly working with the Crossbone Vanguard or at least receiving some pay. But what doesn't really explain it is how did word not spread, really? On Luna, you would notice a battle happening and like enemy mobile suits taking over a mass driver. I think there's only one on Luna. So it'd be kind of a big deal, right? You'd also notice like an enemy asteroid base pulling up to lunar orbit. So how did word not spread from Luna that, hey, there's an organization called Crossbone Vanguard and they're pretty much a threat? So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. It must have took them a while to build that base, right? It didn't just appear one morning.
It looks like they just towed it out of wherever they were hiding it, and I guess they figured, well, we've seized the mass driver, we're gonna just park this over Luna and essentially, our forward base in this war against the Federation. But fortunately, they lost.
So, what are your overall thoughts on the story, Isaac?
I thought the story was definitely interesting. Number one, because it's new to me. It had some problems as far as, logic and what it does with the timetable and all that, because Crossbone Vanguard looks brand new the moment that F91 starts. I think, and even in F91, in the opening minutes, like the Federation says we're being attacked by pirates or something, right? They have no idea who they are.
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, gameplay-wise, not the best. I understand they're limited by the technology, but not a fun game. Very difficult. There's better Gundam games out there. Story-wise, pretty interesting to watch through a Let's Play. So that's probably how I'd recommend people consume this piece of Gundam content.
Yeah, I would say if you're one of those people who really likes playing hard video games, this would be for you. But if you're just looking to consume the story of this, totally agree with Isaac. You should probably just use the Let's Play. This is one of those games where if you lose towards the end of the game, it will make you not want to play the game ever again because of how much time it takes to get to the end of the game. And the end of the game isn't much different than the beginning of the game, other than there's just more enemies.
Yeah, and frustratingly difficult. They really missed out on an opportunity to use mobile armors. I felt like that would have been interesting to have battles with maybe a Musai, or those could have been cool bosses. Instead, it was just, different mobile suits of varying powers that you fought against.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned mobile armors, Isaac. So because when I was looking up the mecha for this series, there is a mobile armor listed for this game, yet it was not in the game. And it's called the Grand Zom, or the Grand Zom. And it's basically this giant sort of red version of the Big Zom, but instead of having legs, it's like attached to like a hover unit. It's pretty cool looking, but it was cut from the game for apparently, quote, plot reasons. But it's red, so I would imagine that maybe it was the original intended final suit for Charles to pilot. I could see that.
Actually, that's probably a good bet. They probably didn't want him in the Gelgu. Maybe the Gelgu was supposed to show up earlier or something as like the middle fight.
Yeah, it could be. The official explanation is that the Mars Zeon, and that they were defeated before it could see combat. But apparently it appeared in the official guidebook for the game, but it didn't actually make it into the game, which is unfortunate because I agree, could have changed it up a bit, fought this big hulking thing.
It would have been a cool final boss,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think the gameplay would have differed that much. I mean, you're still going to do the same thing, but visually it would have been cool to have a sort of like a bigger boss.
Not to diverge too much from this game, but I still find it infuriating. Nobody's really taking like those rating games, or at least the type of game they are, and just skin them over with a Gundam. Because they're almost identical, right?
Yeah, I could see that. That could work. I would like that.
How could that not work? We'll do it. That'll be our indie Gundam game.
Gundam Raiden.
Gundam Archimedes, the game.
We just have to learn how to program basically anything.
How to make a game.
How hard could it be, right?
But I mean, yeah. I'll say this about this Gundam game. They clearly took a lot of time into getting the mobile suit designs right, because damn, they look good. You see a lot of other games where maybe, the Star Wars stuff doesn't look exactly the same. There were a lot of Star Wars games at the time on Super Nintendo. But for this game, those are Zeon mobile suits. Those are Crossbone Vanguard mobile suits. The whole little map thing I thought wasn't designed as well as it could have been, and the actual combat itself looked kind of cumbersome. But overall, I think it was an interesting story. It was good to consume, good to learn about, and great looking 8-bit suits. Sorry, 16-bit suits.
Yeah, I totally agree. The suits are definitely one of the high points for the game. So even if you don't, want to go play the game, and you like Zeon suits, I would definitely encourage you to go at least check out the suits on MAHQ or something, because they're pretty neat, and I kind of wish that we had these in like an anime. So which maybe that brings me to my biggest question for you, Isaac. Do you think that this story is adaptable to like an OVA?
Yes, and I think if you do adapt it, you can clean up the story. You'll have a lot more flexibility. You also have a lot more delve into like the plot and pieces of information rather than just the snippets, like the 3 sentences each character gets in between missions. I think it'd actually be pretty great translated into like a short series.
Yeah, I agree. I think this has the template for a solid series. It has a very easy through line to follow with a twist at the end. It's got great mobile suit designs already. You don't even have to do much there. You really just got to flesh out the story a bit, and you could have plenty of action in every episode. You could probably fit it into 6 episodes if you wanted to, or something like that. I don't know. I think out of the ones we've seen so far, between F90, Silhouette Formula, this one, I think this one might be the most easily adaptable. It's such an easy to follow plot. There's these bad
Right.
guys. Bergh, go get them. Right?
Not only that, yeah, but there's a lot of blank space on the canvas. There's so much we can go into about, Wilder's revenge. What's motivating him. There could be flashbacks there. I'm sure Charles must have a lot of reasoning himself for being such a young man, but like being pro Zeon. We can go even into the Crossbone Vanguard. The new officers that they showed us. Get a little bit of Caruso. Maybe he'll be more intimidating than he was in F91, or at least make more sense. It would give us a chance to see a literal handoff between Zeon to Crossbone Vanguard as the villains. So, yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I hope they do it. So now that brings me to my trifecta of epic fails for this game.
Do it.
So here's what happened, listeners. So Isaac, he couldn't get his keyboard working. So I figured, okay, well, I need to play through the game if we're going to review this game. And I did. I played through acts 1 to 9. And then work got really busy. So I didn't play the game for about 2 weeks. But I didn't really know. I'm not big into emulators or anything. I don't really know much about them. I had to go find one to play this game. So when I beat Act 9 and Act 10 was starting, I was like, you know what? I don't really know how to save my game. I had hit saved game after clearing every act. You're given the option to save your game. Naively, I thought that was actually saving my game. I would imagine that most emulators, you have to save it through the emulator, not saving it through the game. So, but I knew that I didn't really know how the emulator was working, so I just left my computer on with the Act 10 screen on for like 2 weeks until I could come back and finish the game.
Oh dear.
So then that was mistake number 1. So then I decided, okay, I need to go finish the game last night before recording this podcast. Knowing that each act took about a half an hour, I figured I could finish the game in another 2 hours or so max. But I thought, why don't I stream it on Twitch? So I created the Colony Drop Twitch stream. I streamed all of Act 10 to nobody because I was doing this at about 1:30 at night. No one is around at 1:30 a.m. Pacific time to watch Twitch stream of a 1991 video game about Mobile Suit Gundam, a side story no less. But that's fine. I figured we could just archive it and put it up. So then I got cocky because during the stream I realized that I wasn't using the A-type and the D-type. I was only using the V-type and the F91. So I thought, you know what? Why don't we show off the A-type and the D-type a little bit to make sure we get it all on stream? Because I figured the game was going to get harder, and I really only wanted to use the V-type and the F91 to beat Act 11 and 12 once I got through 10. And I had Act 10, which I think Act 10 and 11 are definitely the hardest ones in the game. I had Act 10 all mopped up for the most part, except I think maybe 2 or 3 squadrons. And then I died because I was using the A-type and the D-type, and I couldn't get back to the ship fast enough.
Of course.
So that was disappointing, right? And because I was at the end of the act, I had spent an hour on that, and it was already close to 2 a.m. at that point. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll just reload my game because I saved after Act 9. So I reset the emulator and I hit game start, and it started me over at Act 1. That was when I really knew I was in trouble, right? So I thought, okay, that's bad. I don't have time to play Acts 1 through 9 again to get back to Act 10. That's going to take another 10 hours. So then I go to the load option for my emulator, and I load slot 1, okay? And apparently the last time I saved in slot 1 was Act 5, okay? But Act 5 is a little better than Act 1, right? So I was like, well, I could give it a shot. I could try to get back there by the time for this podcast. So I play through Act 5 and Act 6. Takes me about an hour. So it's now about 2:30 in the morning. I'm wrapping up Act 6. I go to save it. I go to save Act 6, and I hit save. And then I go, you know what? I better verify that it's saved. And I can start on Act 7 in the morning. There's no way I'm even going to make it to the end of the game just being in Act 7 the next day. I mean, Act 7 to 12, that's half the game. It's going to take me another, at the rate the enemies come out at that point, it's going to take you another 10 hours. So I reset the emulator. I go to the load option to hit slot 1, which is where I had saved my now already reduced progress down to Act 7. But I was tired at this point. I think I actually fell asleep on stream. I was still streaming. So I streamed Act 10. I streamed me dying. And then I streamed Act 5 and 6. And I think I actually fell asleep at the end of the stream. And so when I woke up, I tried to load Act 7 to verify that I had saved it. But instead, I hit save on the title screen. So I just saved over my Act 7 progress to be saving the game at the title screen, which means I was now back at Act 1. So that was mistake number 2. But I thought, you know what? Okay, at least I still have my stream. Because I did actually stream for about an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, and I explained all the different gameplay things as I went through Act 10, cleared the whole map. And I was like, cool, well, we have the stream at least. We can talk about that. But then it turns out that Twitch doesn't automatically archive your streams. You have to actually turn that option on, which for all those people who maybe stream a lot, that probably seems obvious to you. I've never streamed before. So not only did I lose my progress from Act 10 back to Act 5, I then saved over my Act 5 to 7 progress back to the title screen, which means 0 progress. And in addition to those two, I lost my stream of about, hour 45 minutes of explaining this game. So that was probably the most compounded failure, like trifecta failure of anything gaming related I've ever done.
As punishment, you will be launched from the mass driver on Luna.
I felt like I got launched from mass driver, let me tell you.
What are you, a boomer? You don't know how technology works?
Well, I just assumed that your Twitch stream was archived, but I guess not.
Your call sign from now on in the Federation will be Boomer.
Boomer. Boomer 1.
Who keeps bumping into the Salamis? I think that's Boomer out there in the heavy gun. I was like, oh god, of course.
Can I at least have a cool number, like Boomer 86 or something?
No, your number's -1.
Oh, Boomer -1.
Boomer -1.
Oh, well, Boomer -1 reporting for duty on the King Space Pig.
There you go. Okay, Boomer. How many Haros would you give Formula Wars?
It gets points for the story and the mecha design. The gameplay was passable back in the day. The gameplay has definitely not aged well. It's not really a super fun game today after about half an hour. After that, you kind of realize that, this is going to be the same thing every map. So I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10.
I feel like the story was interesting enough to keep someone engaged, but the gameplay was bad. For the time, though, I think it's forgivable. It was still so early in video game development, video game history. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 Haros on the Haro scale.
Well, we're pretty close then.
Yeah. We give it middle marks, more or less, because that's what it deserved. The story pulled it, and then it got averaged out by by the gameplay.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. If you're really looking to continue your UC Next 100 journey and you have to have that 1991 Formula era Gundam video game, this is the one for you.
Fingers crossed it becomes a series, a little one-shot 3-hour OVA or something. I don't know. It'd be so cool.
It would be. Bergh Scred, he's amazing. He legit just tore Mars Zeon a new one. He killed them all. It would be the most fastest paced OVA, just him just zipping through and blowing all these people up. It'd be really fun to watch. I hope we get it.
If he's not a new type, he must be, I don't know, a prodigy of an old type pilot.
Yeah, I want to see his kill count. I don't know why he's not on the list. He's a god for sure. So Bergh Scred's legit. He makes me want to buy a master grade F90 and get the V-type mission pack. So I think I might try to track that down.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode on Formula Wars. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you find a way to enjoy the gameplay. Tune in next time for our next episode.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care, everybody. So maybe one day I'll go back and finish this game, because now I'm upset because I was pretty close to the end.
I don't think you will. There's better games to play.
There's probably better games, but I may replay
better things to do.
Yeah, I may replay the first mission or two so we can upload a video when we put it on YouTube, but we'll see.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'll do the voices of the enemy as they die in terror.
Ah!